5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 48 of the Art of Move podcast with myself, Anthony Manuel, my good friend, Dr. William Raybar. We're out here trying to create the grand unified theory of human movement and biomechanics and training. And we're joined today by the owner of the Handcraft, Ruiz Diel, also known as Rudy. Rivera's approach is a simple one: move better, feel better, do more. Using slow motion video, he highlights the good and the bad to give you the tools to move with less pain and optimize performance. There is no bigger motivator than to move free of insecurity. By taking a tonic approach to fitness, he instills the do what you love and never work a day in your life mentality to develop positive behavior patterns and speed up skill acquisition, because the open secret to success is consistency. Handcraft your own results ASAP. Rudy, what's going on, man? It's really, really great to have you on here today.
Thank you for having me. Just got to fix this real quick. Sorry, got tilted. There we go.
Yeah, totally. We're really stoked to have you on here today because I know you have a really deep fascination with a lot of martial practice and movement, and that's some area that Will is really passionate about, and I don't have a ton of expertise or experience in. And I know that you guys are probably going to geek out a lot about some martial arts elements of movements today. So if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of take more of a passive seat. I'll ask questions from a beginner's lens, and you guys can geek out about some of the specifics today.
100%.
Yeah.
So first of all, Rudy, how did you get into coaching? How did you get into mixed martial arts or boxing, and where did your interest start?
So officially, like when I started to do studied learning and practice, I was 19 years old. I had just started doing security, and I was working in a place that was savory, and I knew that I needed some way to be able to handle myself. It was a pool hall that had party events, and I played sports. You know, I always had an athletic background, but it's different, you know, like if I go and tackle somebody, like using my football experience, and we end up on the ground, then I'm still in danger if his friends decide to approach me. So I knew that I was going to need some way to defend myself while still being quick and mobile. So I started looking into Muay Thai specifically. And the reason why I chose Muay Thai is because it's the art of the 8 limbs. I'm going to be able to use my hands, but maybe I don't want to break my hands. So maybe I have to use an elbow or a knee. And you learn clinching, which is you're going to get in a lot of clinches, even if you're just trying to take somebody off the premises. And I thought it was good for self-defense, you know, and it was really cool because Anderson Silva was knocking people out. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And that's where it like started. And then I learned a whole bunch of other things. I learned boxing because boxing helps your Muay Thai. I learned BJJ. I'm still a white belt though. Wrestling, self-defense, a whole bunch of stuff. And it's been on and off since with respect to injuries, and also focusing on different types of strength and conditioning. Like originally I was into bodybuilding, and then it went to powerlifting, Olympic lifting, functional training, and like the original functional training, like where you're like doing like a one-legged stand on a Bosu ball to increase stability and your brace core and all that. And that was kind of like my mind was in two worlds. It's I want to be a good fighter and I want to be fit enough to be better than everybody else. And that's what led me to try and create the Handcraft to help people not only strengthen themselves, but be able to handle themselves when the time is necessary, or, you know, sport application as well.
Very nice. And so are you a GOATA coach? I'm not sure about that.
Yes, I'm a certified GOATA coach, yes.
Okay, so yeah, that's why we agree on a lot of the topics, you know, on your stories. I'm like, yeah, this guy gets it right here, right? So this is gonna be awesome. Yeah, just a little bit on my background. I boxed growing up, high school, nothing major. And I kind of quit, you know, university for about 10 years. And I came back to it. I was in CrossFit, did bodybuilding, did powerlifting, went into CrossFit, and just wanted to stop lifting so much. Got back into just, you know, cardio wise, hitting the bag. And I was like, oh, I love this. I forgot how much I actually love this, hitting the bag, working the boxing movements. From there, I got into boxing for pretty heavily for a couple of years. And then now it's just, hey, why don't I take slow motion video and try to instill it in myself? Go part by part. What is Mayweather actually doing? What is Canelo actually doing to create the forces that he's doing? And let's copy it because I can, right? So that's kind of where I'm at now. And it's a better way to learn because I can see something and go attempt it. And once you do that, you kind of get the nuances to what is going on, right? Is it a similar experience for yourself?
Yeah, I found the reason why GOATA resonated with me so much was because I was a film rat. Like I played defense in high school, and I knew that the smart guys, the aware guys, are gonna see how things happen before it happens. Like you're reading the formation, you see something, and you're like, okay, I can make a play. My decision is much faster because I've seen this before. I know what to expect. I know when this guy goes here, the quarterback is going to do this or that and the third thing. And then that also translates to fighting, strategy. This guy loves to do this in this situation, so on and so forth. And I was already looking at videos and such, but just never slowing it down to the point where I'm trying to study it biomechanically. That was where GOATA came in. And it just fit. It's like I'm already studying the fight anyway. Maybe I can find something here. And, doing your martial practice, turning that back foot, it all just clicked as well. Bows, corners, this rotation. When you're martial training, there's a lot of rotation. And it just helped me click. And I find that it's easy for me to click with other people who are in combat sports or martial practice because they come from that realm. They understand that the pivoting and the rotation and being supple, not hard all the time. And yeah.
Anthony, do you have any questions on that right off the get-go, or?
Not off the get-go. I like that. So I do have a bit of experience in martial practice, but that was before I even got into thinking about fitness as a whole. And what I found interesting was, like, as I'm revisiting my martial practice now and getting into a little bit of things like basic boxing and when I started it, I was in high school, right? I was in a town called Amherst, Nova Scotia, and I would train boxing in this basement gym of this old black dude, always wearing the same black tank top, and could beat the shit out of anyone who came in there, right? And for me, it was like he would just show me basic movements, and I wasn't thinking about how it should feel in my body or the quality. It was just like, do this, and I did it. And coming back to it now, from the perspective of someone who's been in fitness for a long time and had that bodybuilding background, that weightlifting background, one of the things that I noticed is that I'm over analyzing what I'm supposed to be doing all the time. And I'm trying to figure out, like, where am I going? Whereas before I was like almost like movement innocent. It was like, do this movement. And I was like, okay. And I just did the thing without over analyzing what it was that I should be doing. So the question is, do you find that in that analytical mindset, is there a bit of a transition between making these movements consciously to unconsciously competent? Do you find that you find yourself overthinking or overanalyzing your own movements, or is it something that you can kind of observe and then play with, and you don't think about your movement too much as you're doing it in a martial practice?
I think it's both. I think you can overthink it. And I think coming from a bodybuilding background where you're trying to have this mind to muscle connection and you're really thinking about that movement, making sure you really feel it where you're trying to feel it. Also, powerlifting form, right? I got to make sure my form is good because I want to hit this PR. And you kind of, if you come from that background and bring it into your martial arts, you're going to do that as well. Like, oh, my hook doesn't feel good, or it's not as hard as this guy's because his bag is making much more noise. I think it is good and bad, like anything, where you can overthink things, but sometimes thinking about how you're doing something can help you improve it. It's all about, what I do is I try to make you aware of a position instead of just saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. If I can get you to do something with as little cueing as possible, you're looking for intrinsic feedback. And that, to me, is the key to helping these behaviors change. So I'll say, do this, right? Do what I'm doing. And if they kind of get there, I'm like, all right, that's good. Now let's try to, I train things from two different spectrums too, either really, really easy or really explosive, because either way, you're working on that movement on two ends, if that makes sense, right? You're working on it on the macro and the micro, which will help you kind of piece together the puzzle. And then over time, you'd hope to see growth until you see something like, all right, now that's what we're looking for, technique wise. Like specifically, if I'm looking for someone to get more hip drive in their punches, you're going to see the hip turn first before the shoulders, because if they don't, if they're really stiff or braced, they're going to do a lot of this. They're going to do a lot of like horizontal flexion, which, don't get me wrong, getting punched in the face is not fun, right? But there's a difference between a stiff jab and a touch jab, right? I can pepper somebody, or I can say, back up, I need you to give me some space. And if you watch UFC or boxing or MMA, you'll see fighters instinctually respect the jab because they'll be more hesitant to fight, or they'll be more on their back foot, or they'll be more flinchy. And that is what I try to get people to have in their striking capabilities. Striking is not just being smart about it, it's also having the ability to make someone respect you, because then I can make more opportunities just by, I'm gonna hit you, and then I get a strong flinch, and then it's like, oh, you left your ribs open. So
yeah,
that's kind of how I approach it.
I agree with both of you there. Like the analytical, really thinking about the movements. You don't want to do that in a fight. Like if you're in the UFC, you never want to be thinking, obviously, right?
Yes.
But it's the same type of thing as, like a GOATA exercise. You really want to drill the perfection, and then it'll come out during the time when you're stressed, right? So that's what you're really looking for. And there's internal versus external cues too, right? Like I can have the best cueing. I can watch the slow motion. I can make my body do the movements, but internally, am I generating the power properly? Am I sequencing? Am I confident? There's all those things that aren't biomechanical as well, right? With regards to fighting. So you can't really always go analytical, but you have to at times. A little bit of a story. When I was, in high school boxing, it was more, my coach was like, just get in there and you'll figure it out. And you figure it out with people who are better than you, but you take a lot of damage and you build a lot of bad habits. So you'll see a lot of fighters actually become pro this way as well, right? And they're guys who can take a lot of hits and keep going. That's the way that they learned. But a guy like Mayweather is calculated. He doesn't go in there and just spar and get beat up. He's measuring to the exact millimeter, and he's going for that, right? So that's a little bit of the nuance for me there.
And also he's been doing it since he was a kid. So he's been, if we're putting him on a spectrum, right, of like, let's say it was a GOATA 10. He's been a GOATA 10 since he was a kid, and it's carried over to the point where he's 50-0. So he doesn't have to think about much at all, allowing him to think tactically in real time, which is incredibly important when you're limiting your oxygen. Yeah.
He's always saying that himself. He's like, he prides himself on the intelligence of his boxing. He's like, I'm one step ahead mentally. I'm constantly adjusting. He always brags about his adjustments, where most boxers are like, my prowess, my speed, my power. He's like, no. I make adjustments, and I'm more intelligent. Even if you're beating me this round, I calculate, and then I'm gonna have a different style next round to overcome what I saw.
Real-time adjustments. Any fighter, like the thing about like what you'll see in pad work and bag work that beginners don't realize is that it's kind of like choreography. You're building the muscle memory, but in a fight, especially in a combat sport where somebody has studied you, you have to be able to think on the fly, like improvisational dance or something. In order to, it's like, okay, so now I see this person does this in this situation, so I'm going to think of what sequence is going to allow me to take advantage of that. And that's something that's really complicated, that you have to think on the fly, which is going to be muddied if you're like, is my hook doing this, or am I throwing with power? If you can ingrain it in the gym, right, and then autonomically be able to pull it out, you'll be able to think more tactically in real time.
So the deliberate kind of thinking element is you're sort of drilling things to the point where they can be unconscious.
Yeah.
And then, like my brother's very, very into jujitsu, and I did a little bit. He showed me a little bit, and we were very, very into watching jujitsu fights and watching jujitsu tournaments. And we kind of like laughed. It was like, sweaty rolling around chess, where these people are trying to predict the next move, and they're really, there's a lot of muscle memory because they're drilling the same transitions, they're drilling the same submissions, they're drilling the same shit over and over and over to the point where it's unconscious. But the thing that you have to be conscious of is paying attention to what the other person is doing and trying to predict what they're doing. So what the conscious element is practicing to the point where there is unconscious competency. You do want to overthink it almost in the practice element. I guess in the same way, like if you're relating it to a weightlifting situation, or a powerlifting thing, you deadlift at a super light weight. This was what was my philosophy, was like, I'm going to deadlift frequency at a light weight so that my technique is so dialed in that when I'm lifting at my heaviest, it looks the same as when I'm lifting at my lightest. So when you're in those high stress situations, you're so practiced and your nervous system is so used to these things that you can, like you said, you can pull them out on the fly. So I guess that makes sense. It's practice, it's neurological patterning. And do you practice, how would you practice the transitions or the reactions to, a situation in a fight? Like you said, you're talking on a level of like setting up jabs to see if you can create other openings for the next move. Is there a way that you practice setting up moves and following through with them? Is there a way that you practice reactions? I guess you obviously need a training partner to be able to do some of these reactionary training things, but how much do you practice the actual situational stuff and the situational drilling and the transitional drilling?
If you're like, I mean, you'll see that in the very basics in the beginning, especially like just getting people to understand the concept of a 1 and a 2, right? You got to first get them to understand the purpose of a jab, and the jab is basically like the icebreaker, and you have to like my coach says it's like you're trying to create a sentence, right? And there's the first word that starts the sentence off, right? But you have to learn the alphabet first. You have to learn it letter by letter. Your jab is A. You have to learn your jab because your jab is going to be what sets everything up. If I throw a double jab, right, and then I kind of fake this one and throw a right and you react to my first one, then that is a very basic combo that you learn at the very beginning, right? It's just 1 and 2. And you can say that is basically a situational thing, right? That's if you're in a fight, you have to learn, am I going to be doing this 1 or this 2? Then you can get a little bit more complicated and say, well, this individual likes to slip his head whenever I throw a hook, so I can throw a hook and follow it up with an uppercut. But then that's a little bit more nuanced. That's real-time problem solving. So I would say, it's pretty much from the very beginning. It's just about how much more in depth you're going to go with it, because that's what you're trying to learn, experience, and embody it when you absolutely need it. When your adrenaline is pumping and it's harder to think.
Yeah, I can add a little bit of experience to that with boxing. Most people start out shadow boxing and on the bag, right? And when you're on the bag, most people want to just go ham on it and just hit it as hard as possible. But you're not learning any distance. You're not learning footwork. Your mind is fixated on the bag, and that's never how it goes in real life. No. Bags don't hit back, and you need the footwork, the in, the out, the rhythm of. It's like a dance. It's like you're dancing in one spot and just shaking really hard. That would be like most people on the bag at first. However, once you start in the ring and actually even light sparring, you start to understand that it's a back and forth dance, and there's a rhythm to it, and you have to follow the rhythm. Even if, like, let's say somebody throws a hard punch at me, I have to be able to deflect it with the same energy. Where if someone throws a soft punch, I don't need to deflect it hard, right? So there's always the back and forth that you can only learn in the actual application itself in the sport. But then once you learn it, I can go back to shadow boxing and have my imagination be like, the person is in front of me. If I can use that imagination there, I can make my shadow boxing much more like real life. And that's kind of what I do now. I don't have a lot of sparring partners, and I'm more interested in the movements behind it, even though I love sparring and I love both. I'm not trying to be a combat athlete. So I can take those movements I can imagine a sparring partner and I can have just as much fun with it doing that dance. But really, you need to be in the mix and know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, sparring is important when it comes to development because you get punched in the face and you realize what is going to be your reaction to certain things because you feel really good, but like he was touching on about dance. I feel like dance and fighting are almost they're flip sides of the same coin because you have the choreography aspect, right? You're putting in this timing. There's a percussive rhythm to it, and if I go off rhythm, that might surprise you. Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about how professional fighters do it, right? Like, let's take Lomachenko, who's a boxing champion right now. Amazing, best amateur record of all time. It was almost like 401 or something like that. Ridiculous. Winning 400 fights, losing one. Okay, so when he's going in there, he actually took 3 years off and just did Ukrainian dance, which is very, very footwork heavy, right? Very extremely. If you YouTube that, you can see it. So that has helped his boxing. He has the best footwork and therefore the most technical boxer. He was allowed to develop that because he had that next level footwork, and it is a back and forth, and he can just do better dance moves than the other guy and create different angles to really take advantage. And in boxing and martial arts, angles is where it's at. You come in at an angle for the most part. You never want to come in straight. Well, I shouldn't say never. You mostly never want to come in straight, right? So
some people want to just go right at you and go to town. There are people, more durable individuals will tend to use that strategy. But yeah.
Mexican style boxing, right? Like
Mexican style, or I want to say Dutch kickboxing, high guard, square, walking right at you, and they're going to throw a lot of power shots. So like heavy Thai kicks, and you see lots of hooks. Or even like if there's this fighter from the old days, a boxer actually. His name was Henry Armstrong. He's like one of the forefathers of like inside fighting, and he uses his head kind of like a unicorn, where he just drives right into you because he's going to control your posture, back chain versus front chain. So he's going to be in a more optimal position for power, even though he's going to get hit. He's in a better position because he's back chain. He's in that athletic position with his hips behind his ribs, and he can rotate, and he's pushing his opponent off balance. They'll try to kind of like cover up above him, but it's just going to lead to helping him open shots. And also, just by turning, I can open up stuff. So if my shoulder turns his shoulder, it's going to create a little bit more opening in his midsection for me to land something.
Sorry, the volume was
a little bit off.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you there, Anthony.
Look at him walking him, and there's a bunch of fighters that Joe Frazier actually did something a little bit different against Ali. He used something called a cross guard, but he was pushing into Ali, trying to get them into situations where their footwork would actually be not detrimental, but minimized, right? Because if I can pressure you and kind of put you into a position while at the same time getting that angle, it's like a battle for percentages of who's going to hurt who more, right? I want to be in the best position to do power to you and to not be hit, which is almost always at an angle, because if I angle away from your power hand, it's going to be harder for you to hit me on either side, and it's going to open up my ability to hit you. And you can think of that whether you're uptight in a phone booth or if you're fighting at range. Someone who's good at creating crazy angles with crazy footwork, Dominic Cruz. He can get inside, outside range, and he was like one of the first, like, I don't want to say weird styles because it sounds kind of disrespectful, but certainly different. Yeah. If you watch his footwork, which he based off of Willie Pep, another older fighter, it's not your usual back and forth, maybe a slip left, slip right. He would add such weird head slots and footwork that it would confuse opponents, almost like he was dancing. And, he would get hits. He would land on people.
He was doing a lot of shifting. So basically when you punch, your other foot travels forward. So you're always switching which one's the lead foot. It's very confusing for people who haven't seen it. and because not a lot of guys do it, you don't get a lot of those looks anyway, right? So it's very hard to predict what the guy's going to do, because now instead of 1 foot forward, he can have both feet forward. He can switch them. So it opens up the opportunities on both angles. And the opposing fighter has to think of a lot more. So it's interesting what you said with the head in the body and all that. Like, did you watch Isaac Cruz versus Gervonta Davis?
No, I didn't. I only saw what was on Instagram.
Okay. So basically, it was one boxer, and it's interesting because he has the Mexican style where he goes straight in and he's coming at you. And people who bounce back and forth, like a Muhammad Ali, that's their game. They want you to lure you in and then back off. But if you're just going to bulldog into them, they can't do it. So you're willing to take the hits to get inside and then do your work, right? So a lot of the Mexican guys will do that. They'll hold real tight. And look at how tight Cruz's guard is, and he's stalking him, right? And Gervonta's probing with his jab, and now he gets him in the corner, and he's in trouble. He's not used to this, even though he's one of the best fighters in the world, right? Look at how tight that guard is, and he's coming in. And if you watch Cruz, like this guy, he's like a little Mike Tyson. He'll come in, he'll just bulldog his way in.
Right?
Exactly. He'll bulldog his way in. And with other guys other than Gervonta Davis, if you watch any of his other fights, he's getting in there and he's just punishing the body. And the guys are not used to it. They're just getting hurt. That's still Gervonta Davis. If you can go to another fight of his, just like Isaac Cruz versus anybody else. Yeah, that guy. Sure. You'll just see it within seconds, most likely. Or maybe Isaac Cruz highlights or something like that. But as soon as you start, yeah, there it is right there, right? Like as soon as he starts, he just drops you because he's willing to just take a couple hits, holds a high guard, kind of like Peter Yan, where he's very disciplined with keeping his hands at his head. He doesn't let go until the opportunity presents. And then the guy can't do anything, even if he's a better mover, right? So there's that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. So part of what I do is I'm working on trying to create a martial arts system that is relating back to how we move, right? Because I figured if my walking is helping me with my skill acquisition, then I'm always going to be developing some form of combat necessity, right? If my hip is turning over when I'm running, when I really need it to turn over when I'm hitting, I'm going to have it there reflexively. And that's what I'm trying to obtain. So one concept of like, besides thinking, instead of thinking bouncy and more, I'm going to kind of put you into a corner with my presence, right? If that makes sense.
Yep.
I think front leg bow, back leg bow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I'm going to walk somebody down, I'm kind of rocking in this because if I come forward, I have the load for the front hand. If I come backwards, I got it for the backhand. If I come backwards, I have a counter hook. If I come forward, I have a slip. I have options. But the base, right? Rigid foot, bows and corners, energy flip. Boom, boom, boom. And it works regardless. So when I first learned boxing, it was kind of counterintuitive to what I was learning in Thai. In Thai, it's high guard. You even want to be out here kind of a little bit. And I was taught the Philly shell. And the Philly shell that's what Floyd Mayweather uses. You're much more bladed. Muay Thai, you're going to be much more square, right? Yes, exactly. One hand low, one hand like this. And you're thinking, well, your chin is exposed, right? But if I just put a back leg bow, right, this shoulder comes forward. So any jab that comes down this way has to come through my shoulder. And, if you look at Canelo sometimes just by saying no, he dodges punches. So not only do you have to compete with this, if I add that head roll, I can stand right in front of you and not take any damage. Yeah. If I posted a video to my story of me using a spar bar. First thing I like to do is I get up right to my nose, right? And then I pull back maybe a hair and I want to smack it. And I just want to desensitize myself to this stimulus because even when I'm doing that, and I've been doing this for years, I get flinchy, like, oh shit, is it going to hit me? Because you feel the wind, and it does hurt when it hits you, because it feels light. When it smacks you, it's not fun. And I just let that go by. And then once I feel comfortable, like, all right, this is easy, I'll bring it a little bit closer to about right here. And then if it will hit me unless I say no. So that's probably a drill you've seen before in my story. Maybe you will have, where I kind of move out the way and then throw that counter, because I want to develop that autonomic response. But again, it's going to be me saying no is just an energy flip, right? I'm just building tension on this side, and then I release it, boom, plyometrically, and that's where you start to get the snappy touch of death power versus this straight. I call it a front chain punch versus a back chain punch, because front chain, I don't need to rotate, and it's gonna hurt. Don't get me wrong, it's gonna hurt somebody, but not all people, right? There's punches when I throw in the back chain, it doesn't matter if it hurts you. If it hits you in the right spot, you're gonna go to sleep, or even if you fully block it, it's much more jarring. That person will respect your striking attempts much more.
So who would you say exemplifies that energy flip? Right off the top of my head, Tyson. Right off that.
Tyson is
bow to bow, boom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. Jack Dempsey was a forefather who was Tyson's, everyone has that fighter that you're like, oh, I want to be that guy, right? And that was his. He modeled a lot of his game off of Jack Dempsey. You see a lot in Thai, right? A lot of Thai combos are like 2 hooks and a kick. Ramon Deckers, he's a good example of someone that flips energy. He's known for being insanely powerful. There's a long like Rod Tang.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It would be most of these guys who can come forward and be successful and have knockout power, right? Like I would think would exemplify that type of energy transfer.
Mm-hmm. And they even like Floyd is as well. But see, the reason I think he's much more of a genius than people give him credit for, because he is able to do this flip with even the tightest of windows, with the straightest of lines when it comes to fire, right? Where if you imagine the Canelo hook, right? Canelo tends to be really round and wide when he reaches over for that hook.
Yes, he does.
And when you look at Floyd, everything is just so tight when he throws punches. But if you think about it, he's kind of pre-rolled in a particular way already. So all he has to do is like this little nudge, and boom, that's where the rotation comes from. Now, he wasn't known as a power hitter or much more aggressive fighter in his later career, but he also had hand issues. He was breaking his, I believe he broke his right hand. I don't necessarily remember. And there was one fight in particular where he won clearly, but the fighter he was going against, he considers one of his hardest fights, even to this day, post-retirement.
Emmanuel Augustus?
He was complaining about his hand. Yeah, exactly. Emmanuel Augustus. And even though Augustus was getting beat clearly, he was still coming forward like a zombie. You know what I mean? Like taking the hits, and basically he was composed, right? A lot of people, you have this feeling like, oh, I'm going to kick this guy's ass. It's a championship fight. I deserve to be here. And then you get demolished. It's very demoralizing. I feel that when I'm in sparring and I'm like, this guy is hitting me way more than he should. Like, I need to be tightening things up. I can only imagine when people are watching you, millions of people are watching you get beat by someone like Floyd Mayweather, you start to get demoralized. But he just kept coming forward, and even though Mayweather won, he earned his respect because of his composure, his toughness, and you can hear it even when he's in the fight. He's like, I think my hand hurts. There's something wrong with my hand. And I think that is how he became much more of a defensive, counter-fighting genius, because he wanted to spare his hands for the length of his career, which, he's 50-0, and we consider him the best defensive fighter probably of all time, even though, anything is arguable when it comes to fighting.
Absolutely. So with Mayweather, so Pretty Boy Floyd was his original, like, from when he was young, and he was much more aggressive back then. And then there was a point where he became Money Mayweather, and he became more calculated and more intelligent, but less aggressive. Do you think it was because of the hand? And does that have anything to do with how he does pads? Because he does very unique pad work that I don't see almost anybody else do. What is it about that? This is a two-part question. What is it about that pad work that works so well, and why aren't people doing it?
People do it, like sometimes what it is you don't see everything in hype videos in media because you can't give away the whole bag. You know what I mean? Sometimes things do come out. Yeah, like that this hitting the pad softly looks good to someone who appreciates technique, but the casual person is like, well, what is he doing? He's not preparing for a fight. That's him working on the low end, the volume, the easiest part of it, the micro, if that makes sense, right? Just that chug at this small step, which is what I do too as well. I try to tell people you don't always have to be the hammer. Sometimes you want to have that well, not sometimes, at all times you want to be able to have that technique at a beck and call, so this light pad work that you see him doing, I do believe is related to his hands. Probably he just didn't want to break it again because he's Money Mayweather and his hands are his money. But also, for health reasons, it sucks. I get hand pains now that where if I'm riding a bike for too long, it feels like I'm going to fall off because I can't grip. And I'm not a professional fighter, so I can only imagine the volume of punching that he's done in his career, that he's probably really careful when it comes to how he uses his hands. Just an assumption, but you can see it in the light work, right?
Yeah, like I think with sorry, Anthony, were you gonna go say something there?
Yeah, I was gonna pivot. So if you want to keep on that same train of thought, please continue.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, with Mayweather, I thought that, and this is just a theory of mine with the pads. He's staying in range and he's going really softly and just letting his reflexes work, and that's actually his strength as well. Like being able to be relaxed in the pocket. I wonder if drilling that so much in that unique way allows him that relaxation in an actual fight to carry over like that, where most people, and especially beginners, and you'll even see it in the pros, try to hit the pads really hard. And again, it might just be social media thing where they're showcasing, but you won't see a lot of soft pad work anyway being showcased. So that's just an aside that I kind of, hypothesize there.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just want to ask a question, because you are a GOATA coach and Will is very, very into GOATA as well. And I wanted to kind of ask both your opinions on this, because when I study a lot of martial footage, one of the things that I see that is not congruent with the GOATA philosophy just from first glance is some of the footwork positions that you get into in boxing and in kickboxing scenarios, where one of the main concerns that GOATA has is the inside ankle bone low position, that contributes to a lot of, obviously, like hip, knee, and ankle issues. And I find that the back leg of a lot of boxers, you find, is almost like parallel to, or like perpendicular to the front foot, and there's this sort of planting thing, and you do find an inside ankle bone low position in a lot of boxing. Is there a GOATA perspective consideration when you're setting up your footwork, or do you find that it's less consequential? Like, what's your take on that?
I think you're going to be a great athlete if you're born a great athlete, right? Because there's going to be WOTA athletes that are, look at LeBron James, right? It is something that you can get around, but I mean, from at least what I've observed and what GOATA coaches observed, it puts you in a risk category for injury. It puts you in a risk category for nagging injuries. What I would do is, I don't like to take anything away from a fighter. Like, I don't want to say anything is bad. What I would do is I would get them into GOATA shapes, and I'll let them see for themselves, because that's how I discovered it. I found it on Instagram. I was like, all right, let me check this out. I tried it, and things were getting better that didn't need practicing. Like I got better in a back squat, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like I haven't back squatted in so long. That's really what sold me on it. I was like, I'm not doing the things, but I'm doing them better than I ever did before when I was thinking of trying to create the perfect ass to grass squat. Now I'm just working back chain and opening up my hips. I'm just getting there really effortlessly. And not that I do it regularly, it was just something like I can see how just opening up my hips and having a stronger foot is giving me more power for free. And that's what I try to bring. I don't want to change anything that they might think is. I don't want to give them a nocebo. I don't want them. If they're performing in a way that is not affecting them and it's working, then I'll leave it as is. I'll show them it, and if they feel that it is better, which most of the time they do, they'll adapt themselves, right? That the whole overanalyzing thing. They'll feel what's wrong when they're running, like or not running, but training or whatnot. The reason why I said running is because what I'll do is I'll have people work out with no shoes on, and they're like, my feet are cramping, and my feet don't cramp when I work out. And it's like, because you don't use them. Now that you have something that's giving you sensitivity, feeling, you're getting more engagement out of your foot muscles, you're getting more engagement out of your calves, and you try to macro it, right?
That makes a lot of sense. I love the point about not giving someone a nocebo either. Like if it isn't causing any harm, or it's like contextually maybe a lower risk scenario where they're not dumping a ton of pressure into it, it wouldn't necessarily be something that you would try to hammer out of them and get them over. Again, the whole overthinking thing. It's like they're always trying to stay inside ankle bone high and get punched in the fucking face. Which one's going to be? Which one's a little more dangerous at that point, right?
Yeah.
Well, you do see a lot of inside ankle bone. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, one, you do see a lot of inside ankle bone low, but you see a lot of it culturally, right? So you're gonna see it because we have a lot of it. What I do is at 3 stages, right? There's got you thinking about it, you think about it a little less, and then finally you don't have to think about it, it just happens. That is what I'm trying to drill with them when it comes to the patterns, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's what it is. Get them and then they'll notice and they'll be like, hey, when I did the thing you said, it felt different. Insert whatever word sport here, and it's like, well, yeah, I thought it would, but I'm glad that you're telling me it instead of me. I noticed something early on. What I was doing was like, how do you feel? Does it feel like this? Does it feel like that? I was telling them how to feel, which that's not a really good approach when you want someone to change behaviors. They have to be able to feel it, because then they can associate feeling with a joint action or a position, and then they can practice it, and then they can handcraft it according to their frame.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And you do see a lot, like especially with fighters, that back leg inside ankle bone low. No one's ever telling them this, right? Like, I thought you should push off the big toe. That's the wisdom now, right? So there was never a problem to have inside. Yeah, it was never a problem to have my inside ankle bone low in the back. As soon as I switched it, I've said the story like 3 times. I got way more power, like a major percentage more power out of my backhand. And another thing was landing in the bow. Not even thinking about my punch, but thinking about landing in the bow made my right hand much, much stronger, just because I knew I would be balanced. I knew where to catch my balance. I knew how to transfer the balance after, where before I was going off balance because I didn't land in that bow. So that's not even I didn't have to do any bag work. I just thought of my feet. And because of, knowing GOATA and understanding it at a nuanced level, I was able to transfer it immediately. But for a fighter, that would be very hard.
I just pulled up your Instagram page because Will said there was a specific question he had.
Okay, so that top right video where the guy's punching there, yeah. So Rudy, can you see the video here?
I can, but it's like really, really small. But I can see, and I've looked at it a lot.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about anyway. So the fighter here, he's side slipping the jab and he's coming over, and you call this a hand drag. Can you run us through what's happening in the body and how he's transferring power here, and maybe try to keep in mind that the audience may not see this, so a description would be great.
Yeah, we
no
do
worries,
record
no
these
worries.
live on nofilter.net where you can see the actual videos that we're sharing. We do have some visual elements. So if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, go to nofilter.net. You can go to my profile and watch the video replay of this as well. But Rudy, you can go ahead and try to break it down audio style for us for the time being.
All right. So as you can see, when he goes slow, watch when he puts that front foot forward, his weight is shifted in his back leg, right? That's a back leg load. But he's moving forward. So it's almost like an aggressive defense position. He's able to return fire by turning his hip over. And as you can see, it's hard for me to see here, but I call it the arm drag because your torso spins, which is dragging your arm behind it, and the shape of your arm changes the line of fire. So if you think like an open hook from Canelo, it's going to be round. It's going to be really round because it's a long hook. If you think of a counter from Floyd Mayweather, it's a straight line, but the underlying mechanism is the same, right? And he's able to use this bounce to feed the bow. The hip turns, which turns his sternum. His sternum is dragging his arm behind him. Now, I can be really wide with it, or I can be really tight with it. If you think about arm wrestling, it's not from here, it's from here. I'm using my body. A cue that I saw from this guy on YouTube. Well, I don't know him personally. I know his son. His name is Ron Lipton, Hall of Fame referee for boxing in New York and New Jersey. And you'll see his videos on YouTube. They're like from 12 years ago, so it looks like an old phone, old piece of technology. But he can work the bag. He has power. He's brilliant. He talks about a punch, especially a right down the pipe. He's like, it's almost kind of like I'm arm wrestling, right? I want to get here with my body, and then it comes. And all he's doing is manipulating his torso, and the plyometric of that spin is elastically bringing that arm into a position. And that's how you get the snappy strikes. Learning how to train. I always do this, right? This, shoulder shrugs, right? And I use rope flow because this is the shake or the shimmy that you want to be able to get. And it's not just left, right. It's up, down, left, right. So you'll see people kind of do this roll, right? And you'll see sometimes the best boxers won't even come and finish a punch all the way. They'll kind of just do this because they're working that figure eight, that Ouroboros, right? Mm-hmm. And it's at the hip as well. So if you are able to use the hip turnover effectively, which means you got a strong foot that's not going to collapse and cut off that turnover, and you kind of couple the torso with the hip, right? So you have your hip drive, back chain punch, because you're coming backwards first, right? I want to use my musculature behind me when I land. And I haven't put these out yet. I haven't done the full breakdown, but I call it a back chain flash. You'll see on the real powerful boxers, just like Canelo, like Floyd Mayweather, Bernard Hopkins, in one particular video I put up in my story a while ago, their musculature in the back lights up. Now, this only happens if you're using it, right? If I do this, it's going to be more relaxed. But if I see that musculature engage or shorten, you're going to see him light up like he's posing, like he's showing off his traps. You'll see this flash of back chain engagement, blur, and then you see impact. So the idea is my front chain doesn't bring the hand forward. My rotation brings the hand forward, but I'm actually going backwards to a particular degree. And I have certain drills that I give away, or I shouldn't say give away, that I put out so that people can start to experiment and play with them. And I've gotten some good feedback. This one coach, Coach George Lopez on Instagram, he messaged me and told me he started to notice a difference in his striking, how he felt more snappier. And also, I create a threat with every movement I do. If I'm doing this coming forward, my head movement is threatening. So it causes you to think, where is this guy going to hit me from? Creating more opportunities, especially if you understand orthodox and southpaw in real time. Because like what Will was talking about before, just by switching positions, I give myself double the arsenal I had before. Does that make sense? Right? I can create more of an advantage just by changing which front leg is in front of me. Just like he said about angles, but at a much tighter degree, right? An angle is going to be different whether my right leg or my left leg is in front of me with respect to the opponent, which is a little bit more of an advanced concept that I'll touch on in the future. Right now, I'm just trying to get people to understand the arm drag, because people think ooga booga punch, right? They think, I had this one coach that he calls them a henny hook. And I was like, it's like kind of like punches you'll see somebody drunk throwing. Like, I want to just end your life. These mean, I forgot what they're called. No love punches. It's not that. It can be that, right? It can be that. But I can take that same mechanism and thread it through a needle. And that is where you get your touch of death. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
It absolutely makes sense. And just one question or a couple questions here. With the arm drag, I noticed that his hand does come down a little bit away from his chin. Now, are you concerned about that, or are you promoting that as like a bouncing mechanism for the fascia?
I recommend it to a degree. So, one, if you play at a regular speed, right? If you just watch that video in regular speed, the window is like that, right? But then again, that's the only amount you need to go to sleep, right? So there's risk reward. But as you know, Will, there is no perfect defense. There's no everything you do is going to have an opening. If I have a high guard, my body is exposed. If I'm square, I'm easier to hit. Even though I'm more durable, durability is not a gift everyone has. I certainly don't. I know I was banged up a bunch of times, hence why I leaned more towards a Floyd Mayweather style Philly shell, because more of the time you're missing blows or they're glancing off of you versus someone who's just going to be more durable and eat those hits. It is it's not a perfect game. You just want your experience in real time to help you cover gaps that appear. Now, his hand does come down and back, but there are times where I can do the same thing because I can uncouple my shoulder, right? This, right, is the same as this, and I never left my chin, right? So I can get that, boom. I can still get that bounce. My power is going to be off, but I'll have enough that I can make him effectively respect my striking.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword for me because it's almost like practicing an inside ankle bone high where it's not going to show up inside ankle bone high when I sprint, right? But I still want to do it in practice, where the arm drag for me is how much do I actually use the fascial recoils and have my hand away from my face, especially because I'm not a fighter, right? I just like to use the movements and feel the movements. Basically from there, like I've learned Soviet boxing and it's very disciplined with your hands, right? Like you don't drop your hands, you use the rotations and pop out of it. It's actually very interesting. I don't know if you've looked into it, but they're very into the ankles, very into rotations, and very into the kinetic chain. And you won't see a lot of arm drag from that system. So it's just a question that I had about them.
No, yeah. What I would say is the arm drag is very nuanced. Where I can, like I said before, here I'll show you kind of, right. So can you guys see my shoulders clearly? Can you see my shoulders?
Your video is actually cut out for me. Can you turn your video off and on and just see if we can get your video back online? I don't know what happened. Your video just cut out. Let's see.
There we go. Okay.
Oh yeah, you're back.
You're back. Nice.
All right. My shoulders, right? Wait, what were we about to touch on again?
Arm drag.
Arm drag. Yes. Okay. Right. So on the 10 scale, on the exaggerated scale, which I like to use as an awareness thing, right? I keep my arm all the way back here, right? I can bring my hand forward without ever extending because I'm just turning. The key is this, right? You see how I'm just bringing my shoulder back? That's an arm drag. If I can bring this back like this, right? That's an arm drag. I can be tight as hell, like a Floyd Mayweather, counter, because my slip is going to feed that counter torque at the top, and then release. And I can do it without even leaving my face because the movement is from the center. I can change in order to adapt to the range that's necessary. So I can show you guys from the old days like Sugar Ray Leonard to newer days like Canelo. And these are high level guys that are using these techniques. But then again, there's a risk reward to it. But that is the sport. You're risking just going in there. There's people that fight with their hands completely low. Izzy switches it up sometimes. So it is a matter of experience. It's a matter of reaction time, and it's a matter of study. Because the more you look at fighters, the more you want to embody those fighters, and which is part of why I think a lot of high-level fighters have this behavior reflexively, is because they're probably well studied. You know what I mean? You're not only studying your opponent, but you're studying historically to find what is going to help you overcome this guy's particular strategy that's helping him winning. So my counter to it is that the arm drag is not an ooga booga punch. It doesn't have to be this wide thing. I can be tight and still be able to do it. Tyson is a perfect example. He's a peekaboo guy, and he is what we'll say is what I would say is the like epitome of someone who throws these really wide, powerful angles, and he can do it tight. And he flipped the D'Amato shift, right? It was strike so powerful, he ended up in a different stance because of the energy flip. And again, it's risk reward. It's, do I want to open myself up? And if I do, it doesn't have to be incredibly. My favorite thing to do, what I tell people, is I'll jam up into my opponent and throw that arm wrestling punch I was talking about, where I just spin, right? Just this is all I got to do right here, because that's going to be more powerful than just trying to tap them like this, because my body will just kind of touch them. And it's usually enough, but also I am a bigger guy. But I think it is a hip-driven back chain punch, which we know is forward locomotive, or at least if you subscribe to GOATA, you would say it's a forward locomotive behavior. So you are just entrenching those behaviors into your combat movements.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So with the just pivoting off that, you made me think like Canelo really is the example of that. Like right now, especially how he fights, he's very high guard, not a lot of footwork compared to before, right? He's very still and he uses the gyroscope of his upper body to do a lot of the probing within the inside, right? So he's not doing, back and forth Manny Pacquiao footwork or anything like that. He's using the gyroscope of his upper body to do the work. At the same time, with the high guard, what comes to mind is the fight with Russian guy. What's his name? I forget. It was his last 3 fights anyway, and he knocked him out. Basically, Golovkin? He was stalking. No, it wasn't Golovkin. It was after that. Bigger guy. It'll come to my mind anyway. Yeah, anyway, he stalked him with his hands up, and he was doing that same thing, high guard, and then he came out with a wide hook. And that hook looked like it was coming to his belly, which he did 3 or 4 times before. The guard comes down, and halfway through the punch, he switched the trajectory.
It becomes a whole different punch. Yes.
And it's amazing, because when you try it, it's like you have to be loose to be able to do it. But at the same time, he's coming at you with a high guard. So it's like this dichotomy thing. You can see it looks like a simple punch, but not at all, right? Like it's very, very complicated to get that looseness, being tight, but then loose as you throw. So that's very interesting that I never had a word for it. Arm drag is like literally, I think, great for that.
Yeah, that's concept. The reason why I use that word. I have initially, I've thought about different ways to like word it or call it a thing. But I found the arm drag to be the most effective because it helps to connect. I make it as simple as possible. If I have to give you a cue, it's do this. Drag your arm. And then you'll see whatever. And then you'll try to emulate what you're trying to get them to capture, right? And that's even harder when there's no nuance with social media. But understanding that underlying behavior, it's undeniable. You'll feel the power when you hit the bag and the bag is more forcefully moving from you, or I call it bending the bag, right? Some people will hit the bag and it'll sway. Other people will hit the bag and it'll turn into a capital L. And that's how you know they have a more piercing, powerful punch. And once you start to develop that and fine tune it, and those extrinsic feedbacks start to synergize with the intrinsic feedback, you develop that autonomic ability to, again, the touch of death, you know?
That fighter was named Sergey Kovalev. It's the Kovalev knockout. Take a look at it on YouTube. I'm sure you've seen it, but for the audience members, take a look at that knockout. Watch the lead up to it, maybe a minute before he hits him in the body, and then stalks him, comes at him, looks like he's going to the body, changes in mid direction up to the head, and then he knocks him out. Check it out on YouTube. Sergey Kovalev, Canelo Alvarez. Sorry, Anthony, I cut you off there. What were you gonna say?
No, I had nothing. I was just gonna say I'll try to pull it up now.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. He does it in a lot of fights, actually. He does it in Kirkland fight. He does it in what's his face? He does that arm drag in the who is the Puerto Rican boxer again? Really good. He fought Mayweather as well.
Cotto?
Yeah, Cotto. The Cotto fight, he does it really well. That slip and then over the top, that was a nice arm drag. So that's another one there. I'll throw that up on the stories tonight.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And if you want to see the arm drag, I have a video. I'll probably throw it up on my stories. Ryan Garcia's doing this shoulder pummeling, right? He's kind of doing this roll, right? Again, if you look at it real slow, right? If I think this shoulder's coming back, right? If I just do this shoulder in response is going to come forward, right? So it's almost like I'm rolling backwards like this. And this in itself is an arm drag. It doesn't even have to just be solely from the hip. Sometimes I don't have that ability to turn my hip over, but if I can bring this shoulder back like this, it's going to bring this one forward. Does that make sense, right?
Absolutely.
My shoulders are going to have to turn because they're connected. It's a chain, right?
The easy model. Sorry,
Go
the
ahead.
easy model would be if this is the spine here, you just have a T at the top, and it's always rotating like that. Exactly. It has to go together, exactly. But also you have the fascia between the two shoulder blades that if one comes back, it pulls the other. So that could be part of the arm drag mechanism as well.
Yeah.
Were you finding that video, Anthony? Okay. Audio.
Sorry. Yeah. So you said it was Sergey versus Canelo?
Sergey Kovalev.
Sergey Kovalev versus Canelo. But who knocks out
who?
who?
Canelo knocks out Sergey Kovalev.
Okay, cool. I was watching all these videos and I was like, is Sergey knocking people out or is he being knocked out?
Well, he's really good knockout artist himself, but Canelo took him out at a lighter weight, right? That's why it's so interesting to watch Canelo work. It's brilliant stuff. And it's great because he doesn't have here it is. He just did it already and he's going for the last punch. But that was it's the setup punch to that. So here, see how he comes in and he's looked like he was going to the body, but he changed to the head.
Yep.
Yeah, he dips down, boom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that frame that Kovalev saw of him dipping, his brain registered, I need to protect my body because last 3 times I got hit, that's exactly what happened. Canelo knows this, boom, comes up to the head, and that's the knockout. Looks simple, but it's actually extremely brilliant, right? So that's awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So it's tricking the other person's nervous system to anticipate a body shot. So he's pulling down. Yeah, that's crazy.
Exactly. Which comes, right, when you anticipate something, you're paying respect to that thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh, that's going to hurt me. I need to put my arm down. All of a sudden, Canelo comes over the top. So that touches on 2 things that I was talking about earlier. One, making a lot of things look the same, right? So I'd say the drop-in looks like, let's say, for instance, I'm in a southpaw and I'm dropping into my right leg. It'll look like a cross. It'll look like a slip. It'll look like I'm taking a single for his lead leg if he is in whatever position, right? I can turn this into a multi-level threat with the simplest of movements. So I get to economize my energy. to touch on what William was talking about before, the smallest of movements is all I need to get out the way. So the less energy I'm using to move out the way, the more I'm going to be able to deliver to you or over the long haul of 12 rounds when it comes to boxing, which is why you want to really just have them blows glance off of you instead of these big drastic movements, because they create bigger openings, or you're going to get tired. If you're taking, sure, a back step works, right? But if you're fighting on your bike the whole time, by the time you do have to fight, your punches aren't going to be as strong. You're going to be more winded, probably going to be more telegraphy. So yeah, basically what we're talking about here when it comes to that underlying mechanic, that is what becomes the threat. And if you don't know where it's coming from and you can switch it to either side, you're literally gonna have to in real time decide and not be sure exactly what's coming. And if it's power, it's gonna hurt. Even if I block, it's gonna hurt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You have any other questions, Anthony?
Yeah, just to give some people some practical stuff. If people are listening and are kind of feeling like me in terms of they don't have this, like I love observing this and I'm seeing new things, and I do highly recommend if you're listening to this, go even if you don't want to go watch our replay, go on YouTube and go watch some of these boxing slow motion videos and observe what's happening and see if you can start seeing the nuances yourself, because it is a whole other level of training your eye. I'm seeing things that I've never seen before listening to this conversation and trying to watch the video. That's why I've been more of a passive participant in this episode, is because I feel like I'm trying to assimilate and learn from the perspective. If someone is feeling like I am and feel like they're trying to assimilate and understand some of this stuff, what is a basic practice a person could get into to start viscerally experiencing or introducing martial training or martial awareness into their movement practice?
Apart, if you're just going to do it on your own, if you're just going to do it flat out on your own to like test the waters, YouTube is a great resource when it comes to the basics. I love rope flow for the basics of the movement because it's low impact and you're again working on that shoulder rotational figure eight. I love rope flow. I think actually Dave Weck is incredibly brilliant for rope flow because it just literally ties in to the fight game, right? If I'm doing this, I'm moving my head just by rolling my shoulders. This could be enough, right? Just turning this, if you watch Canelo, that is enough to miss a really hard blow. And you're basically conditioning it when you're using rope flow. Or if you tighten it up, you can think more of like a liquid defense where I can go cross guard, high guard, flowing, which is another thing that I'm kind of working on where, again, this all adds threats. If I look like I'm just defending and I kind of snake charm you, all of a sudden this elbow comes through and it's going to hurt. But I can also kind of redirect punches if they're coming in, right? I could redirect those missiles coming in. If I am an MMA, I can hand trap you and come over just by kind of doing this. All just in this double matador type movement here, right? Or similar to like a speed bag, right? Learning the churning and how I can use this just by moving my shoulders that change the line of fire, right? I've never extended once and look at the angles I'm taking. And that is where that back chain punching comes in. So rope flow, YouTube, and apart from that, just going somewhere and doing it. And doing something you think you'll like. Don't do it just because you think it's the best. I turned out to like Muay Thai, but I chose it because I thought it was going to be the best thing. But that can also be limiting because I was like, I'm a Muay Thai fighter. I'm going to be able to kick anybody's legs out from underneath them. Then you take a punch to the face and you're like, oh, wait, maybe I need a little bit more. I need a little bit more boxing knowledge here. Or you get tied into I go to this mixed martial arts gym up in Hudson Valley, New York. And I remember my first Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. And I basically got choked out by someone that was literally like a 120 pounds, right? She's a professional fighter, but she was able to she would have killed me. When you tap out, it's like, oh, I died. You killed me, right? She would literally killed me just by getting into a position, using her frame, and enjoy what you're doing, right? And that's the reason why I say bringing a tonic approach, because if you like doing it, you're gonna do it a lot. So I try to make people like moving, and then it's like, hey, can I come in? Instead of, man, I gotta work out, or they'll just do it themselves, right? And that's the key, right? To changing the behavior. It's a movement behavior. So you have to get them to see the value, feel the value, and then they'll live it,
I love that concept. Like everything you said there, turn it into play. I would structure it like if I was learning, if I didn't know anything right off the get-go, I would learn footwork, right? Like footwork and shadow boxing. And
Yes.
like I mix a lot of dancing with that. There's a really good program on dynamicstriking.com by Ben Sava. And it's a footwork program, just basically getting you to understand footwork and shadow boxing and how to apply that. Now, I would take the GOATA principles, put that in the footwork, so then you have the best of both worlds. Start playing around with it. From there, it really is, if you want to get into fighting, you got to actually get in there and do it. But if you want to just do it kind of like I do it, that's what I would do. Get the GOATA footwork. The rope flow is amazing. I agree with that. I love working the engines, like the shoulder engines and the gyroscopes. And it's such an easy, low impact way to do it. And it stimulates the brain. I'd get that going and just start practicing on a bag and actually do the footwork maneuvers in the GOATA patterns. Bow corners.
Just to add on to what he was saying, you also want to kind of like, there's always this level of competition when you're learning, because you're always comparing yourself to somebody else or what you see in a video and you're not feeling it. I try to pull out my ego as much from a situation as possible. So like I meaning with Olympic lifting, right? It's basically competitively like three movements. If you're thinking about a power clean, right? There's gonna be days where if you've been training it consistently, like, oh, I fucking got it. That's smooth. I got this. 2 days later, it's like I can't hit the hole. My timing is off. I'm weak. It's this up and down battle that the more you allow it to just happen, instead of like, oh, I need to do this, I need to perfect it, the more I find it to be enjoyable, the easier it is to learn, because you're not essentially you're not hampering yourself with limitations like I need to do this to get to the next level. Experience it, like what Will was talking about. Get in there and take your lumps, because that is part of it. And then you learn what lumps you can take and what lumps you can avoid. And that's when you start to enjoy it. Then you walk around like, I can beat this guy's ass. Hey, it's just a level of confidence you get.
So I have a really specific question, because you do have a Muay Thai background, and I'm actually going to Tulum in a couple of days, and I'm meeting up with an old buddy who's a retired pro MMA fighter, and he asked me to go train him and to teach him some of the functional fitness stuff that I've been talking about. And he has a Muay Thai fight. He's getting back in. He's like, I'm not, it's pretty exhibition. It's not pro, but I'm going to go do a Muay Thai fight, because I really miss, MMA. He might be retired from the pro stuff, but he wants to get back into it. So I was going to show him a lot of GOATA principles, a little bit of the WEC stuff, maybe some core fist, just, for some of the hitting the bag stuff. But in terms of how being a certified GOATA coach and being someone who has experienced principally in Muay Thai, how do you think, what's like the biggest takeaway if I'm going to go show him some basic stuff beyond just like the global laws of GOATA movement? How would I relate that to his fight that he has for Muay Thai?
So my method, I kind of developed this. GOATA has this thing called gait analysis, right? Or not gait analysis, pre-movement screening, where you are looking at the joints, right, and see how they behave with respect to whether it's GOATA or WOTA, right? You put them in a classification. I kind of used that to build what I call a combat movement assessment, where you just look at the guy doing stuff, right, and then you try and see where the WOTA shows up. Is his foot weak? Does his foot collapse and extend in a kick instead of have a rigid pivot? Is he arm dragging? Maybe he's so braced and technical that he's actually front chain punching. And with time, it's going to hurt, especially if you're a former, I'm not saying he is, but if you're a former fighter, think of the amount of coding you did in order to put autonomic responses into something. So it could be something that might have hampered him, and you can basically what I'm saying is you want to look at his movement. You want to see and then address it like that. So for me, I almost always start at the foot because most people have either a weak foot or unconditioned foot. Now, if he did Muay Thai, he probably has a strong foot because of just the way you're supposed to be in your Muay Thai stance. A lot of Muay Thai fighters tend to be GOATA if you look at them. Senchai, Ratang, there's a lot of them. So if that's not the case, then you look at his hip and see, or maybe he's more front chain than he is back chain. It's just maybe a simple moving of things. And then once I kind of have this idea of where he is, I will address it with what I think needs to be worked on. Maybe he needs to be more back chain. Let's go on the ground, do some rockers and maybe an air chair. Or if he needs footwork, start to strengthen that foot. I find most of the time strengthening the foot tends to, like, people just discover things on their own. Like, oh man, my kicks are harder because now I actually have a pivot and not this, this. I'm not walking in quicksand anymore. Now I have a surface to roll on. So that would be my strategy. Just I would look at him with the GOATA mindset. I would still even have them. I still have them do the pre-movement screenings. It's just when I'm doing it specifically for a combat athlete, I'll say, well, we got to look at that tape to see how it relates to this. And then I'll be like, well, you see, it shows up here, it shows up here, it shows up here. Let's regress it and let's work at it on this then and work on it from both sides so we can get to that fine point. Again, using the intrinsic feedback so he finds that point instead of saying, no, this is wrong, stop doing it. Because then there's a chance he'll pull movements out of autonomic and back into like an associative behavior. Like, all right, maybe I should be pivoting. Now I'm sleeping. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think that was sort of.
I'm kind of going off the cuff a little bit.
That was sort of my plan. I was going to try and get him assessed in terms of just standing and walking and even running, and to see what his natural tendencies are, and then get him to hit a bag and just show me. It's like, all right, go do some kicks, go throw some punches, show me some elbows, and where's your pivot happening on your foot? Where is your power generating from? Are you
exactly
way back here? Are you able to lean into your back chain a little bit more? I was gonna relate the gait to the martial element, but this is the first. I'm very new to relating biomechanics and efficient biomechanics to a martial application. So while I was going to do all this movement assessment with him, and I was going to show him how to train intense in a biomechanically secure way, I also have this unique challenge of like, oh, this is a Muay Thai fighter. Like I understand the basics of biomechanics and they should be universal, but the martial application is so different than just forward locomotion or even cutting or sprinting and all the things that I've sort of specialized to understand in my own training, my own exploration. It's totally new. Unfortunately, guys, I got to wrap up, but Rudy, man, thanks so much for hopping on. If people want to learn more about your work or work with you directly, what's the best place for people to find you?
Instagram, right? That's where I put all my work. That's where I'm reachable. That's where I talk to people in real time. And yeah, that's the best way to reach me.
And that's at the Handcraft _. So the Handcraft _. So you can go catch Rudy there. It's been super, super good. Will, any closing thoughts, closing questions before we wrap up here?
No, I was just going to add something small to that last one. I would say fighters' stances are very tricky, and they're married to one, perhaps. Depends how much time you have with them. I would just show him the GOATA footwork, maybe even show him, if you stand like this in the backdrop, show him the backdrop for sure, because a lot of fighters don't get into their back hip. They'll figure it out on their own. It all depends on how receptive they are and how much time they have, and don't force anything on a fighter because they're very married to their systems, like much of us are, right?
Yes. Yeah. People are very married to their systems. just before I go on a rant, I'll keep it short.
Yeah.
Just telling people to fight in a different stance, they'll say, no, you got to master the one stance. If you go to the other side, you're going to make things more difficult. And all you're doing is putting one leg in front of the other. But it becomes, no, you need to be this way, master this, and then you can worry about that stuff. You're getting too ahead of yourself. And that's like, even at the basic levels, when I argue, like, you probably learn twice as fast because you're using the other half of your body, you know?
Agreed.
So, yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Rudy. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this episode with
me.
us, man. This was a really cool conversation. I have a lot to think about and a lot more to study, and we'd love to have you back on. I'm going to watch a lot more footage and see if I can kind of get the hang of this and see if I can come back with my own commentary down the road. And but thanks for joining, guys. This was episode 48 of The Art of Move. Thanks for listening. You can check out our upcoming shows on nofilter.net. We'll catch you next time.
Have a good one, guys.